What's up everyone, Line Roar here, and the Serpentide clan just landed in Bloodline Heroes of Lithis, and it looks like it could possibly be another stake in the heart of Male, Water, and Sun. So of course, I'm gonna do a full breakdown and analysis. But first, download Bloodline Heroes of Lithis, a mobile RPG action fighting game where you can marry your champions to create new and unique hybrids. Use the link in the description to start with some free stuff, including gold and diamonds. See you hopefully soon. Alright, so maybe this is personal preference, but I really enjoy the art on these heroes, especially the female, and I know people's opinions might vary on this because it does take a special kind of taste to enjoy that like green and black serpent type of aesthetic, which shows up in some games from time to time, but I've always really enjoyed that aesthetic. I think they did a really nice job with her art, and I think we can probably make some pretty cool hybrids with this. But let's take a look at the trait and the skills on these heroes and see if this is going to be a good clan. And I certainly want to talk about how these are going to impact Male, Water, and Sun later in the video. The trait is called Serpent's Wrath, and it says at the start of battle increases their crit rate by some percent for 15 seconds. This effect cannot be dispelled and does not stack. Now, this trait could be good if you combine it with a like crit damage type of spell. Keep in mind that this is under 15 seconds, so you're only going to do this on a team that the battle's typically over within the 15 seconds, which, I mean, that's how I tend to build my teams. I really like fast and hard. I like to end the battle quickly. I like to take advantage of these kind of traits. But this is not going to be a good trait just on its own. You're going to need to combine it with crit damage, of course. Otherwise, there's not really a point in putting it on. You're also going to need to just put it on heroes with a fantastic regular damage to begin with, high strength and things like that. And so we're talking about a point at which traits are getting crowded out. So this isn't one you're just going to go chase and put on everything. You're really going to have to be intentional about how you build champions if you're just going after this trait. On these particular champions, I mean, it kind of incentivizes you, since they're already on them, to be looking at their crit damage and trying to increase that, you know, based on what the skills are. So let's take a look at those skills. The Serpentides are assassins, and we're going to take a look at the male first. And I always like to look at the passive because that's typically what affects the battlefield first. And so Molten Serpent is what his says. Within 4 seconds after casting an active skill, each of the caster's normal attacks or skills will deal extra damage equal to 60% of strength to the target, additionally gaining 30% lifesteal. Now, usually I really like to hear that increase in damage from like regular attacks, because you can get around some of the game modes here where maybe like Bulko's in the meta, or you're not allowed to use ultimate skills, or they're being controlled by your opponent. So I usually like to see this stuff, but it depends on the active skill going off, and that can be slow. If an enemy champion dies within 10 seconds of receiving caster damage, the caster will evolve up to 2 times. First evolution increases crit rate by 30%. Second evolution, active skill steals the target's energy. Now, just by itself, this passive looks very slow to me. Like, first you've got to wait for the active skill to really take advantage of the passive skill. So when I say I like to start with the passive because it usually affects the battlefield first, it's kind of like not in this case. So, you know, we're waiting on the things that usually happen later in a match, and typically later in the match is when the match is already over, even if it's not over. Like the functions of the match have already taken hold that are going to lead to the ultimate outcome, and so we're waiting too long for this particular passive to go off. So that's my sense of this. But the active skill will affect things a little bit. Quickly rushes behind the target with the lowest current constitution, making 4 guaranteed hit attacks with a dagger, dealing a total of 520% strength damage. Each attack also reduces the target's energy by 50 points. So that's kind of cool, at least when the active goes off, and that can go off actually pretty early in a match. Now he's targeting an opponent. This opponent he's targeting, when they have lower constitutions, usually because the opponent has focused on high strength or high damage, and so they're kind of like a glass cannon type. When he focuses on them, not only is he preventing them from using their high strength and damage dealing abilities because he's kind of shutting down their energy, like which is needed for that ultimate skill. But also now focusing on damage, so hopefully stifling them and then also killing them at the same time. And this is just the active skill, so this is a pretty good active skill. Taking a look at the last part here, in battle, the caster's active skill cooldown is reduced by 12% each time an ally uses an active skill. That's kind of cool. So now the active skill, which is needed for your passive skill, once it goes off, now your passive is active, but also when the rest of your team is using their active skills, now his active skill cooldown is reduced, and now the passive skill is going off more. So it sort of becomes this domino effect. It might be slow to get going, and in fact, I'm still a little worried this hero might be a little too slow, because in this day and age, a lot of the passives are already immensely impacting the battlefield before you even get to the actives. And there's the potential he could get shut down before you even get to take advantage of these actives and passives. But it's good to see, at least if the passive's going to be that slow, even though it's a powerful passive, at least this active skill is making the passive potentially happen sooner and more frequently. Now let's take a look at the ultimate skill, Underworld Captive. Summons a Serpent King to bind the current target for 4.5 seconds. The target cannot move while bound and takes true damage equal to 250% caster strength every second. Now that's the part that probably makes me the most excited of what we've read here so far, because of course 250% damage that's true damage can be a lot of damage, and it just skips all the defensive abilities that the opponent potentially has up at that time. After the bind ends, the Serpent King enters the target's body, dealing extra true damage equal to 15% of the target's lost constitution, up to 2000% of the caster's strength. So of course, now when you're dealing damage, it just starts to increase exponentially. So he could really, once he gets going, deal a lot of damage. Inflicting fear for 2 seconds also. So now he's starting to control the opponent. So he's dealing lots of damage once he gets going, and he's starting to control the opponent. If the target is killed by the Serpent King or dies during the bind, the caster gains 200 energy. If the target's already bound while the skill is cast, the bind duration is extended by 4.5 seconds, and the Serpent King's damage dealt to the target increases by 20%. The damage increase is unstackable. So here's my overall feel for how the passive, the active, and the ultimate are working together. I think the passive is too slow to have an impact early in the match. If you can really keep him alive and protected up until the point in which he uses active skill, then things are really going to snowball in a good way for him, in a very bad way for your opponent. Of course, what he's doing is not AoE, and I favor AoE in this meta more than I favor these individually targeting heroes. However, sometimes in a meta like this, where both teams are pretty even and it's 5-on-5, and it's just like which AoE effect is going to take over sooner, sometimes it really helps when you get a hero like this that can break through to the most problematic hero on the other side, which is usually the one with the lower constitution, because they have put a lot of their effort and energy into being the higher damage dealer on the other side. If you can take that hero out, then potentially you're 5-on-4 and their most problematic hero is gone, and that could potentially help to break through tiebreaker situations and really start to take down the opponent. Plus, once he starts taking down opponents, from there it becomes even harder to stop him. So I do think he has the potential to be good if you can find a way to keep him alive and protect him and keep him from being controlled so that his effects can take hold. I do think that's a bit of a risky proposition, but I also think that smart players who are able to synergize and find ways to build a team that can make that happen could potentially find an edge in something like this. My impression, before we move on to the female, is that this guy probably wouldn't break into my top team, but I could be wrong. It's going to depend on the other heroes in the meta. But I do see a very good use for him in my teams 2 and 3, in which I'm now really looking for the synergies available in the rest of my roster to exploit what's going on in the meta and surprise other teams. Now let's take a look at the female. So her passive, Netherworld Ambush. At the start of the battle, teleports behind the enemy with the lowest current constitution percentage, dealing damage equal to 240% of the caster's strength and marking the target for 10 seconds. So she's already doing so much more with her passive immediately. And that gets me excited because, like I said, this is my personal style. I like to be fast. I like the match to end in under 15 seconds. Really takes advantage of a lot of those clan traits that are out there. During the mark, the target's energy recovery on hit is reduced by 60%, and the caster's damage to the marked target is increased by 45%. If the target dies during the mark, the skill is cast again. Upon the first cast, the caster gains immune to targeting for 5 seconds. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a passive that is going to have an immediate impact on the battlefield. And I tend to like that a little better because of the speed. Venomous Bite is the active skill. Commands a venomous snake to bite the target, dealing damage equal to 600% of strength on an active skill. That's a lot of damage. And that poisons them for 5 seconds. While poisoned, the target cannot restore constitution, and 50% of any healing received is converted into direct damage. Resets after using the passive skill. Wow. Okay, here we go. And this is what I was talking about towards the beginning of this, which is that now with both the male and the female, and especially the female, we're getting this situation where we're kind of targeting the male water and sun part of the battlefield. So I'm going to tell you at this very point in the video that for me, male water and sun is really not anywhere close to being my top damage dealer. In fact, in most matches, he is barely doing any damage. He has become so slow in the meta and so slow in my own team. Like often the match is over before he really gets to have an impact as far as damage is concerned. However, I'm still finding I can keep him around for healing. And in Guild Conquest and Valley of Conquerors, you typically do need that healing to keep a team going through 10 teams, 15 teams, 20 teams, right? It's when you don't have a healer that you're not able to get a lot of that constitution back on your team, and then you don't have as much stamina and constitution to be able to just kind of grind through an opponent. So male water and sun is still definitely part of the meta, even if he's not dealing damage. And now we have the Serpentides who are really going to put another stake in male water and sun and now really affect that ability for him to heal. Both through the male really just working on trying to kill him before he has an impact, and the female here who's going to stop him from at least healing himself, or potentially if you have another hero on the opposing side of the battlefield that's more problematic and she's going after that one, then what's happening is she's keeping them from healing and potentially taking them down. I see the ability potentially for the two Serpentides to work together on the same team. And I think it remains to be seen if any of these heroes can break through to a top tier team. But definitely on like maybe my second team or my third team, I can already see a synergy where they work together to really just take out the most problematic hero on the opposing side of the battlefield. So male water and sun has already been hurt by like the Dire clan and the new Bloodcraft heroes and the fast meta and things. And now you get one really powerful hero in the female Serpentide who could potentially staunch the healing effect too. So I'm just kind of pointing that out, but do remember this is not an area of effect type of deal. This is a single opponent. Sometimes that can be useful as long as they are powerful enough to take down the most problematic hero early in the match. While poisoned, the target cannot restore constitution. 50% of any healing received is converted into direct damage. So not only are you staunching the healing, you're turning it into damage, which is pretty amazing. Okay, let's take a look at the ultimate Serpentide. I can't believe we're not even to that part yet. Releases a tidal wave of snakes to attack the target, dealing damage equal to 900% of strength. That is a ridiculous amount of damage. This damage ignores the target's strength resistance and increases up to 50% based on the target's lost constitution. So the number is actually higher than 900%. And ignoring strength resistance, which I think is probably the effect that is keeping most damage from happening. I mean, this is a really powerful effect. And so she has the ability to do an enormous amount of damage here if that ultimate can go off. Damage increase reaches its max when the target's current constitution is below 30%. If the target is killed, the snakes will then swarm the nearest enemy, dealing another round of damage again. Wow. Okay, so she's powerful. And not only do we have another hero now that is working to stymie male water and sun. But even if you're going up against a team that doesn't have male water and sun, I think she has the potential to do a really good job at being a true assassin that could tilt the match in your favor by taking out an opponent, making it a lopsided match, and then causing things to spiral from there. I think there's the potential for both of these heroes to be good. I'm leaning towards the female right now because she's just faster. I think she's having a bigger impact on the battlefield than the male is. However, of course, I think, again, if you can keep the male alive, he could have a huge impact on the battlefield as well. And I think it remains to be seen if any of these can break into the top tier. I think she's more likely. It's just my opinion. I'm speculating right now. But if she doesn't break into the top tier, I certainly think there's room to put them both on the same team. They have synergies that work together, and that's how I would look to potentially do something like that. As far as traits are concerned, these are obviously both damage dealing heroes. I'm more inclined with the male to maybe put honorable on him to try and keep him alive and try and I'm thinking maybe pure heart as well, because it is the active in the ultimate in particular that, you know, once you get those going off, things start to spiral from there. And honorable and pure heart are really going to help him get to that later part of the match and just help things to snowball sooner. And then obviously brutal, because he uses a lot of strength there. So those are some pretty vanilla traits, but those are ones that I think he kind of needs to work on him. There are certainly clan traits you can get creative out there if you want to that are going to have a similar kind of effect, but I kind of just think the vanilla traits are going to be good enough on him. For the female, I'm looking to go just as much damage as possible. I think I would build her glass cannon style. I would go all like damage dealing traits, and there's a bunch of them out there at this point. I'm obviously brutal and aggressive are really great ones. I might even consider the Corbett trait, because like I said, I'm trying to keep things under the 15 seconds and go really fast. And since we're getting a crit rate increase and you can get a crit damage increase, that could potentially be really powerful together. And I'm just really excited to work with them, make some cool hybrids out of it. And play around with them. And I think we're not going to know how good they really are until we start testing them. So I'm going to do that. There is a mask for this event, by the way. I don't think it's a good mask. I already have the mask. It's fine, whatever, but you can get a lot of bouquets out of the puzzle. So since I'm going to be leveling her up anyway, I'm going to be doing the puzzle event. I don't know about you, but I want to know what you guys think. So let me know your thoughts about both the male and the female, and especially if you're testing things out. Please share with the community. We learn from each other. I learn from you. And if you enjoy videos like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. And I will catch you in the next one.